Hello, and welcome to our fifth installment of the Intelligence Warfighting Function Best Practices at the Joint Readiness Training Center. I'm Colonel John Ives. You can reach me via my information here. You can follow me at India6JRTC on Twitter. I've got a small following so far, but I look forward to having more people jump on there and to give us something to talk about, so feel free to join us. Today we'll be talking about the rest of the 8 bullets. Specifically, we'll be talking about the second bullet today. First, let's talk about what I mean by intelligence systems. Obviously, I'm talking about getting your TGS up and operational. Of course, I'm talking about getting your D6 architecture going. Of course, I'm talking about your GeoInt workstations being operational with both licensing and software, and your people actually having passwords and being able to get into their account. Yes, that's been a problem at JRTC. But what I'm also talking about is, what does your intelligence system look like internally to your battalion S2 shop, to your BCT S2 shop? How does the BCT S2 and the MICO come together? What does that system really look like of personnel, personalities, and how does the communication piece work amongst you all? So what I'm also saying in this one is, don't just practice getting your GWS up and operational or getting your GBS up and going, but I'm also talking about making sure you bring the team together so that that system is operational as well. You've got a year, year and a half, sometimes 2 years of, I know when my JRTC rotation is going to be, so how am I going to get after that training? Obviously, MITS is a great way to go about it. MITS has provided something that we've been wanting for years, and that was some sort of an intelligence gunnery, if you will, of how do I get my team all the way through the different tables, all the way up until we're doing a live fire, which would be really JRTC or your brigade exercise before you get to JRTC. And that's what MITS provides. The part that we're seeing is units do very well after they've done their MITS and they show up at JRTC. They do very well. However, what we're seeing is only about 60% of the personnel were there for all of MITS. So don't forget the fact that we live under a sustainable readiness model of how personnel move around. Everybody's coming and going constantly throughout the year, year and a half, 2 years before you actually get to JRTC. Many moons ago, again, I will refer to the gray hair. Many moons ago, we used to have a program called Green Week, where new soldiers would come in and get kind of spun up on who we are as an organization, what it is that we do for a living, get some of those basic 10-level skill tasks done so they could then show up in the field and be a part of whatever exercise we were in, whether it be platoon, company, or battalion, or squadron-level activities. Think about what that would look like for you as you go through your MITS training plan of when do you accept the new people and get them up on those tables that they missed, those portions of intelligence that they are only familiar with the schoolhouse or the organization they're coming from hasn't actually done any of that training. NCOs and warrant officers are key to your training plan, but you have to have some sort of a goal. What's your end state? What do you want to look like? And don't just say, I want to win the reconnaissance fight, or I want to be able to do IPB in a certain period of time. Sometimes that's part of it, but you have to take it through each of the different pieces of what do you really see your team doing by the time you want to be going to JRTC, or what do you want to accomplish while you're at JRTC? What level do you want to be at? And then you can start looking at the training plans where they're coming. So warrant officers are a big deal. Obviously, they're going to tell you that anyway. But what's great about warrant officers is they bring that technical expertise to your organization, especially if you've got an experienced one, a CW2, a CW3 that gets to come into the BCT and be a part of it. But more than just their single source or their fusion capability that they bring is also they were NCOs before they were warrant officers, so they might have a pretty good understanding of what a training plan could look like and how to get an individual soldier from point A to point B to get it towards your goal. But you really need to sit down with your warrant officers because you get a pretty good mixed bag of W01s that show up in an organization. Some of them spent a lot of time as an NCO being able to train organizations, and others didn't. They were very technical as an NCO, and so it was just a easy transition for them to become a technical expert as a warrant officer. So you have to sit down with them and ask the question of, how do you train, and do you understand where it is I want to go with my BCT or with my specialty capabilities so that they can design a plan to help out? And then, of course, your NCOs. NCOs are huge. I'm always harping on where are the NCOs, where are the NCOs? Every time I go out to an organization and it seems like nobody's actually in charge, I always ask the question, well then, who's driving this place? Where's the NCO that's supposed to be keeping everybody moving? To have that this is the standard and we're going to live by it. I want my NCOs to do that. So where are your NCOs? And let me ask you this one. What's their training plan really based off of? Is it based off of your design, or did they do donning a mask for the 8th time this year? Take a look at that training plan that they're doing. A lot of the younger NCOs are going to do the whole, like, I don't want officers looking at my training plan. But if you do, if you say, not, I'm going to design your training, but hey, I'd like to be here, show me a progression of your soldiers getting us to that point, then you're actually helping that NCO develop a good training plan, and you're making them a stronger senior NCO later down the road. So it really is a part of professional development, not just for them, but for you, and then also for the larger intelligence team. Take advantage of downtime. Very rarely are you going to have a lot of BCT level exercises. Realistically, you're looking at maybe 2, maybe 3 at the most, where you're going to have the entire BCT in an exercise. But what are you going to be busy doing during that exercise? Answering to your commander, because you're the S2. So you answer to the commander. You're creating all of these MDMP products, the IPB, and being a part of wargaming and all that. How are you training your team during all of this one? You kind of need them trained up before that begins. A trick we've seen in the past is where people have training already sitting on the shelf waiting for them. For example, given today and tomorrow's weather and light data, do some weather and light effects for dismounted operations moving through that wood line. Pick whatever terrain you want. Make it a desert, make it a jungle, make it the swamps of Louisiana. It doesn't matter. It's all good training. And then switch it up. No, now I'd like to understand how the engineers are going to perform. Now I'd like to talk about how a striker's going to do it. Now I'd like to talk about a T-80. You can mix it up and you can create different weather effects and light effects. And it doesn't take but 5-10 minutes for a soldier to dig up the information and do the effects. If you go to a website like usgs.gov, you can find topographical maps. Granted, they're, I think, 62,000, 1 over 62,000 versus 1 over 50,000, but they are topographical, and they do follow the exact same things that we have on military maps. So take a look at those, and then you can assign different terrain analysis problem sets for areas that they've never even seen before. Grab a topographical map from your hometown and ask them to take a look at the woods around that area, and have them, because you understand them better than anybody else, and have them do some sort of route analysis. Have them go through and say, this is what it would look like if you were driving a striker through this area, or a BMP, or a T-80, or this is how the water's going to flow in the next rainfall. Because you're familiar with what those creek beds look like, you can kind of test them on their knowledge of an area. Use your imagination in all of this. Have somebody describe to you what an IV line is, and then have them draw one out. What would it look like on a contour map? What would it look like on a 1 over 50,000? What would it look like on a 1 over 25,000? Give me an IV line. And then you can take that even further and say, well, given these types of enemy, how would they defend that IV line? Would they use a reverse slope mobile defense, or would they try to set up on the high ground with their defensive positions and overlook the low ground? Have them think their way through the doctrine and tactics using that topographical map that they themselves drew based on an IV line that you made them look up and learn. You can get technical with it. Given X and Y and Z capabilities from EAB plus our organic collection capabilities, how would you collect against name a high-value target? And you can go through any number of high-value targets to get them figure out how would you create a collection plan. And then now you've got basically collection playbooks of how you would just sort of overlay them when you get out to the operation. Right. Again, this is all about imagination when it comes to Homestation training. A lot of it doesn't require any money whatsoever, and that's the part that people seem to miss a lot, is they say, well, I only had 2 training events before we deployed. The battalions don't want to listen to any training that the BCT is doing. They want to do their own. The battalions are upset because, well, we had gunnery and we had all these other things, but there's things that you as an S2 can be training on during gunnery, during platoon exercises, during whatever else. How about you incorporate IPB into platoon sticks? What kind of IPB are you doing for that area where the platoon is going? What about when the scout platoon is doing their training? Can't the S2 be sitting there on the other end of the net receiving some of their calls? Why not? And how about every time the shadow flies, how come somebody doesn't establish the OSRVT? And that brings us to more of the technical side of the conversation. not only can you establish your OSRVTs every time the Shadow is doing some sort of a training flight. Now, obviously, that requires getting the ComSec and getting the OSRVT up and coordinating with the Shadow platoon. But shouldn't the BCTS2 already know when the Shadow's training anyway so they can be a part of it? Oh, of course, because then you can have the collection manager go out and work with the Shadow platoon leader, find out when it's happening, have a collection plan that's designed around this is when it's happening. Go ahead and link in your BAO in that conversation of, hey, the Shadow's flying. Will you please look into the area and make sure they can fly? Of course they're going to come back and say, yes, they can, because that's already been coordinated through the Shadow platoon and their training plan. However, it's good practice to make sure the collection manager, the Shadow platoon leader, and the BAO are all communicating every time the Shadow flies. That's going to be a big issue for you when you come to JRTC. But more importantly, it also gets the Shadow platoon leader in a relationship with the collection manager where they can come back and say, no, I can't collect over there because I'm supposed to be training over here. So bring it online, buddy. Let's get this collection plan that actually matches where we're going to be flying. You can also establish your TGS in the motor pool. Get your GBS up and running. Get your Trojan network up and going. Get that GeoInt workstation up and actually try to pull down some imagery from someplace overseas and try to exploit it. Like I said, you're going to be checking licenses, you're going to be checking software updates, and you're going to be making sure that everybody has access to their systems. Again, I can't stress this enough. Units show up here all the time with a KG-250 that is dead. It takes about anywhere from 30 to 60 days of no use for a KG-250 to die, and they cost over $10,000 to replace. So why aren't you pulling that out of the safe and putting it into use? How about your workstations? How many units have to show up at JRTC and not have access to their workstations until training day 5? Don't wait for BCT level training. This is an opportunity. So again, if we go back and look at what today's point was, you'll see it here on the screen, is it's all about training at Homestation before you get here. Train your equipment, train your people, train your teams. Put it all together and make something. Use your imagination. Use your initiative, train your people. And of course, I'm a big fan of the MITS program, so pay attention to that one. Just incorporate your new people into the plan so that they catch up and stay with you as you go through. And what you'll end up with is something closer to 85 or even 90% of your personnel that were part of the entire MITS training plan all the way through before you get to JRTC. And thanks for stopping in. This is my contact information right down here along the bottom. Join us next time on the gray couch for bringing the Crucible to your couch at JRTC. I'll see you next time. Be safe, be smart, and go wash your hands.